the heart of a bustling city, nestled amid a cacophony of sirens, chatter, and the relentless rush of life, stood a place called Sbarro's. A simple, unassuming Italian restaurant with a history as rich and twisted as its sauces. I had worked there for years, long enough to know the recipes by heart, yet I never could have imagined the horrors lurking beneath the familiar aroma of pizza and pasta. My name is Alex, and I was the head waiter at Sbarro's. I had seen countless customers come and go, but it wasn't the patrons that made me dread each evening shift. It was the restaurant itself. It had stood there for decades, a relic of the past, with faded red awnings and creaking wooden floors. The restaurant had a reputation. People whispered about it, in hushed voices. They said it was cursed, that strange things happened there. But like any good employee, I scoffed at such tales. It was just an old building with its quirks, I told myself. One chilly October evening, as the setting sun cast long, eerie shadows through the windows, I arrived at work, my heart already pounding with unease. It was just another Friday night, or so I thought. As I entered, I noticed the flickering of the restaurant's neon sign outside, spelling out Sbarro's in uneven, unsteady letters. The hum of the refrigerators seemed louder, and the dim yellow light bulbs hanging from the ceiling bathed the place in a sickly glow. The air smelled stale, like it had been trapped there for centuries. I exchanged nods with the kitchen staff, a wary group of individuals who had seen more than their fair share of late-night shifts. Most of them had worked there longer than me. Some even claimed they had seen the restaurant change ownership multiple times. But the building itself seemed impervious to the passage of time. The evening started uneventfully. Customers filed in, and the clatter of cutlery against plates filled the air. I took orders, served dishes, and exchanged polite smiles, all the while trying to ignore the sensation that I was being watched. Then it happened. The lights above table 7 began to flicker. At first, it was subtle, a barely noticeable tremor in the artificial illumination. I shot a quick glance at my coworker, Maria, who was attending to that table, but she didn't seem to notice. As I continued to watch, the flickering grew more pronounced. The patrons at table 7 looked up, their expressions shifting from confusion to unease. Maria's hand trembled as she placed a plate of spaghetti in front of one of the customers. The lights flickered again, more violently this time, and then, with a loud pop, they went out completely. Chaos erupted. Diners cried out, and the emergency lights kicked in, casting an eerie red glow over the restaurant. The kitchen staff rushed out with flashlights, trying to calm the panicked customers. Maria, her face pale, joined the fray. I took a deep breath and made my way toward the fuse box in the back. It was an old, rusted contraption tucked away in a dark corner of the restaurant. As I fumbled with the switches, a sense of dread washed over me. It was as if the restaurant itself didn't want to be illuminated. Finally, I managed to restore the lights, and they came back with a blinding flash, causing everyone to shield their eyes. When the spots before my eyes cleared, I glanced at table 7. The customers were gone, and Maria stood there alone, a look of bewilderment on her face. I approached her cautiously. "Maria, where did they go?" She shook her head, her voice trembling. I don't know, Alex. One moment they were here, and then they just vanished when the lights went out. I didn't want to believe it. It had to be some sort of trick, a collective hallucination brought on by the sudden darkness. But as I looked around, I noticed something else that sent shivers down my spine. The other diners were all staring at us, their eyes wide with fear. They had seen it too. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. The customers left in a hurry, their unease palpable. Maria and I tried to make sense of what had happened, but we couldn't come up with a rational explanation. The kitchen staff were equally shaken, and no one wanted to be alone in the restaurant after that. Over the next few weeks, the incident at Table 7 became the talk of the town. People began avoiding Sbarro's, and the few who did come in were hesitant, their eyes darting nervously around the dimly lit dining room. Then, more strange occurrences followed. Glasses shattered on their own, chairs moved when no one was near them, and whispers echoed in empty corners of the restaurant. It was as if the very walls of Sbarro's were alive with malevolent intent. One evening, as I was closing up, I heard a soft, mournful melody coming from the back of the restaurant. It was the sound of a violin, playing a haunting tune that sent shivers down my spine. I followed the music, my heart pounding in my chest. The source of the sound was the old storage room, a place rarely visited by anyone.
I pushed the creaky door open and stepped inside.
The room was dimly lit, and in the corner, I saw a violin resting on a dusty wooden chair. It was playing itself. I froze, unable to tear my eyes away from the eerie sight. The bow moved across the strings, producing a mournful melody that seemed to seep into my very soul. The air grew colder, and I could see my breath. "Who's there?" I stammered, my voice trembling. There was no response. The violin continued to play, and then, with a sudden, jarring screech, it snapped in two, falling to the ground in a jumble of strings and splintered wood. I stumbled out of the room, my heart racing. I couldn't explain what I had just witnessed, and I didn't want to. The restaurant had become a nightmare, a place where the laws of reality no longer applied. As days turned into weeks, I grew more desperate to uncover the secrets of Sbarro's. I delved into its history, scouring old newspaper articles and talking to former employees. What I discovered was a tale of tragedy and darkness that spanned generations. It turned out that Sbarro's had once been a grand mansion, owned by a wealthy family in the early 1900s. The family had been plagued by misfortune and had eventually gone bankrupt. The mansion had been sold and converted into a restaurant, but it seemed that the ghosts of the past still lingered. One particularly chilling story stood out. In the 1930s, the restaurant had been the site of a gruesome murder-suicide. A man had come to Sbarro's, shot his wife and 2 children, and then turned the gun on himself. The tragedy had left a stain on the building, and it was said that the spirits of the family still haunted its halls. The more I learned, more convinced I became that the restless spirits of Sbarro's were responsible for the strange occurrences. It seemed they were trapped, unable to move on, and their anger and sadness had infused the very walls of the restaurant. One evening, as I was closing up yet again, I felt a presence behind me. I turned, and there, standing in the dimly lit dining room, were the ghostly figures of a man, a woman, and 2 children. They were dressed in old-fashioned clothing, and their faces were twisted in anguish. I gasped and stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a chair. The figures didn't move, but their eyes bore into me, accusing and sorrowful. I could feel their pain, their anger, and their desperate need to be heard. I'm so sorry, Spar. Tears welling up in my eyes. I don't know how to help you. The figures didn't respond, but as I watched, they began to fade, slowly disappearing into the darkness. It was as if they were finally finding some semblance of peace. From that day on, the strange occurrences at Sbarro's began to subside. The lights no longer flickered, and the whispers grew silent. It was as if the restless spirits had finally found release. I continued to work at Sbarro's, but the atmosphere had changed. The restaurant no longer felt haunted, and the unease that had once hung in the air had lifted. It seemed that the spirits had moved on, their dark secrets finally laid to rest. But even as the years passed, I couldn't forget the horrors I had witnessed at Sbarro's. The memories haunted me, a constant reminder of the thin veil that separates the world of the living from the world of the dead. And I knew that, no matter how many delicious pizzas and pastas were served within its walls, Sbarro's would always be a place where the past and the present intertwined, where the shadows held secrets that could never be fully uncovered.